Hi folks, it's Patty. I hope you can all see or hear me. 1 second, we're going to get started. I'm just setting some things up about what we're going to chat about today. All right, let me make sure my screen on. Hi folks, it's Patty. I hope you can all see or hear me. 1 second, we're going to get started. I'm just setting some things up about what we're going to chat about today. I need to mute that. All right. Okay, this meeting is being live streamed. I've got it. I'm also going to make sure that I'm on the One Great Work Network because that is the amazing place everyone can go to learn about truth and to not only truth, but also freedom. Okay, I am going to share my screen and we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Patty. My website's name is Natural Law Help. And today, I'm kind of continuing with my Jesus theme. And I apologize that my camera is off today. That's the way it is. Dealing with a couple of computer issues and I have to update some equipment, but you can hear me and I've got some nice things for you to see today. But we are going to be continuing with our Jesus theme and we're going to talk a little bit about healing in general. A lot of people are suffering with physical issues and, physical ailments have been problematic since even before the pandemic. But let's go ahead and just introduce the Heal Yourself topic for today's live stream event.
See my eyes, I can hardly see.
See me stand, I can hardly walk.
I believe you can make me whole.
See my tongue, I can hardly talk.
See my skin, I'm a mass of blood.
Change my life, oh I know you can.
I believe you can make me well.
See my purse, I'm a poor, poor man. Will you touch, will you mend me, Christ? Won't you touch, will you heal me, Christ? Will you kiss, you can cure me, Christ? Won't you kiss, won't you pay me, Christ?
See our eyes, we can hardly see. See us stand, we can hardly walk. We believe you can make us whole. See the tongues that can hardly talk.
See us give, we're a mass of blood. Change our lives, oh we know you can. We believe you can make us well. You're the hope of a poor, poor man. Will you touch, will you make me Christ? Won't you touch, will you heal me, Christ? Will you kiss, you can cure me, Christ? Won't you kiss, won't you make me Christ? See our eyes, we can hardly see. See us stand, we can hardly walk. We believe you can make us whole. See the tongues that can hardly talk. See us give, we're a mass of blood. Change our lives, oh we know you can. We believe you can make us well. You're the hope of a poor, poor man. Will you touch, will you make me Christ? Won't you touch, will you heal me, Christ? Will you kiss, will you cure me, Christ? Won't you kiss, won't you make me Christ? See our eyes, we can hardly see. Too many of you. That can hardly walk. I believe you can make me whole. See my tongue, I can hardly talk. See my skin,
little of me.
see my legs, I can hardly
Don't
stand.
crowd
We
me.
believe you can make us
Don't
well.
crowd
See my
me.
life, oh, poor man. Will you touch, will you make me Christ? Won't you touch, will you heal me, Christ? Will you kiss, will you cure me, Christ? Won't you kiss, will you make me Christ?
Yourselves.
All right, that does it for that video. But you can see Jesus in this video is really the pillar of compassion and wanting to heal the masses. But we're coming on to a point in time when the example of Jesus needs to be taken on by each and every one of us. You know, I'm not trying to make this live stream a religious live stream, and I know I've been talking a lot about Jesus, but really, Jesus came into our knowing as an example of what to achieve, of what we need to elevate ourselves to become, to evolve to become. We need to become the Christ impulse. And if you see at the end here, when Jesus, if we zoom all the way to the very end, Jesus is yelling as the masses are trying to touch him and to gain that energy of what he is. He's telling them to heal yourselves. Heal yourselves. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. Now, in my work outside of teaching, I do work with clients, and my goal in helping clients, whenever someone reaches out to me, is to really work as a teacher. You know, I have nothing really myself, no energy other than, explaining to others how to empower themselves. In allopathic medicine, physicians, and I'm talking about allopathy specifically, physicians, they are licensed and able to prescribe medications that are strictly prohibited from most other people from obtaining them. So many of these drugs, these pharmacological agents, they are not accessible by many people. But those people with the white coats, the butchers with the white coats, the physicians, they're the ones that can approve the use of a medication. And many of these medications are simply turning off symptoms. They're not really getting to the root cause. And I've talked about this many times before. So that's really not healing. And so when Jesus yells, heal yourselves, he's asking each and every one of us to do more than just take symptoms away. I mean, really, even with nature, it's really easy to, from a physical perspective, it is easy to kind of reduce symptoms. And I think, naturally, it's much better to approach that than it is pharmacologically or allopathically. I mean, you end up doing more harm when you use a chemical, some sort of pill, some sort of isolate to suppress a symptom, because all that's going to do is it's going to add to your toxicity, because, you have to detoxify that medication after it has suppressed a symptom. And we don't want suppression. We want to fix the issue. We want to get to the underlying cause. So, even physically treating yourself naturally is much better, but that is sometimes not enough. And that's really what I want to talk about today. When even natural healing is not enough to get to the root of your problem. To get to the root of what is causing you ill health. How do we get to that deepest part of ourselves? That karmic level of why we attracted this illness into our body. What is it that caused this feeling of dis-ease to become what we then become consumed by? Because when you're sick, it consumes you. I mean, when you're feeling pain, when you have no energy, when a part of your body that used to be functional, when it's no longer working, it's so disruptive in your life. And why is it why do we have to suffer? Why do humans have to suffer? So, with that said, I want to talk about an article that I came across. Let's see if I can pull this up. All right. So I'm going to go over this article with you today. It does have a lot to do with what we just talked about here. Okay. So I'm reading this section. It's from a book. What is the name of the book? I guess I should have begun with that. The name of the book is, here it is. This is the name of this book. This is a free PDF. Anybody could find it online. I actually came across this yesterday, which kind of triggered this idea of what I'm sharing with you today in this live stream. I was watching an Alphabetic YouTube video, and they were interviewing a medical doctor. Her name is Dr. Jennifer Daniel, and she's very controversial, and I really don't agree with her on many items. For instance, she promotes the use of turpentine and focuses a lot on animal foods and high cholesterol foods in her diet and protocols that she, I guess, recommends for people. I don't think turpentine is necessarily something very good for us to put into our body, like most chemicals, but that just, so I'm not kind of promoting that aspect of what she talks about, but, she is someone that I agree with, I guess, spiritually, because even though her perspective is different than mine, I don't feel like we should be harming any animals. I really do believe as humans, we can live peacefully without having to kill animals to maintain our own physical health. And I don't believe that we need to use chemicals like turpentine either to treat illnesses. I think we can do that with plants, with fruits, and herbs. That's really where I find most healing to be the deepest and the most profound. And also, when you're using fruits, you're getting the gift of the plant. The plant, the tree, it did not have to die because that part of the plant is a gift. I know certain herbs, obviously, the green leafy parts, the roots, yeah, you're basically killing the plant when you consume those, but it regenerates quite easily. Many of the medicinal herbs, they're kind of like these weeds that grow everywhere, even in the soils where it's hard to grow most things. You can find like dandelion and comfrey. It's all over the place. Many plants in the mint family. I'm growing some lemon balm in my garden. It's kind of taken over my garden, lemon balm and other plants in the mint family, many amazing medicinal properties. And I'd love to get into that with everyone as we move forward with this live stream, talk about some of the healing properties of the herbs. I talked a little bit about dandelion and I think comfrey last week. Yeah, I do have a different philosophical perspective on healing compared to Dr. Jennifer Daniels, but I do respect her, and I do feel like she is a courageous woman that basically saw that allopathic medicine, which she was a part of, and she practiced as a medical doctor, she turned her back towards it. And she describes what she went through. I've watched many of her videos, but I really recommend, and I'll put it in the notes below this video, her most recent interview on Alphabetic. I thought that was quite profound. And I'm going to read something that she mentioned in that video that I watched yesterday. And so when she was talking about, treating people that are sick, treating the ill, and this connects with what I began this live stream with. She recommended reading this little section from Falun Dafa called The Issue of Treating Illness. So I'm just going to read this. It's not that long. We'll read it together. Okay. In regards to treating illness, I am not teaching you to treat illness. No genuine Falun Dafa disciples should treat illnesses for others. Once you treat an illness, all things in your body from Falun Dafa will be taken back by my fashion. Why is this issue taken so seriously? It is because it is a phenomenon that undermines Dafa. You will harm more than your own health. As soon as some people heal an illness, they will itch to do it again. They will grab whoever they see to treat illnesses and show themselves off. Isn't this an attachment? It will seriously hinder one's cultivation practice. Many phony Qigong masters have taken advantage of everyday people's desire to treat patients after learning Qigong. They will teach you things and claim that by emitting qi, one can cure illnesses. Isn't this a joke? You have qi, and the other person has qi as well. How can you treat him with your qi? Perhaps his qi will overpower yours. There is no constraint between this qi and that qi. When one develops gong in high-level cultivation, what one generates is high energy matter, which can indeed heal, repress, and control an illness, but it cannot remove the root cause. Therefore, to really heal an illness and completely cure it requires supernormal abilities. There is a specific supernormal ability for curing every illness. With regard to the supernormal abilities for curing illnesses, I would say that there are over 1,000 kinds, and that there are as many supernormal abilities as illnesses. Without these supernormal abilities, it is useless, no matter how crafty your treatment may be. In recent years, some people have made the community of cultivators quite chaotic. Among those genuine Qigong masters who came to the public for healing and fitness, or those who have paved the road at the very beginning, who has taught people to treat patients? I should read that as a question. Who has taught people to treat patients? They've always treated your illness or showed you how to practice cultivation and how to keep fit. They taught you a set of exercises, and then you could heal your illness through your own practice. Later, phony Qigong masters came to the public and made quite a mess. Whoever wants to treat patients with Qigong will attract spirit or animal possession. It is definitely this way. Under the circumstances at that time, some Qigong masters did treat patients. That was to cooperate with the cosmic climate at that time. Yet Qigong is not a skill of everyday persons, and that phenomenon cannot last forever. It resulted from changes of the cosmic climate at that time. It was only a product of that period of time. Later, some people specialized themselves in teaching others to treat illness, thereby creating a mess. How can an everyday person learn to treat an illness in 3 or 5 days? Someone claims, I can cure this illness or that illness. Let me tell you that these people all carry possessing spirits or animals. Do they know what's attached to their backs? They have spirit or animal possession, but they neither feel it nor know it. Still, they may feel very good and think they are capable. Genuine Qigong masters must go through many years of hard work in their cultivation in order to achieve this goal. When you treat a patient, have you ever thought about whether you have these powerful supernormal abilities to eliminate this person's karma. Now, folks, this is important right here. I'm taking a pause. Let me highlight this sentence in reference to this written material. When you treat a patient, have you ever thought about whether you have the powerful, supernormal abilities to eliminate this person's karma? And this is really, connecting this to Jesus, what each and every one of us has to do to heal. A couple of weeks ago when I was reading from the Essene Gospel of Peace, Jesus in that book, in the Essenes, was talking about releasing the demons, like in the form of an enema. We accumulate so much toxicity in our body. And if we don't get rid of that, it just agglomerates. It congests our interstitial spaces. And it suffocates our cells. And our cells, they cannot receive oxygen and glucose, and they can't release carbon dioxide and other waste products. And those wastes begin to accumulate, and the cell becomes deficient. And these unhealthy, deficient cells then become diseased. And you can think of that as physical karma from poor action, from choosing the wrong foods, from not moving your body the way that it was meant to be moved. Our bodies have muscles, and these muscles need to contract, and the contraction of our muscles, as the muscles bulge up, they push on vessels, they help to move the blood and the lymph, and we become energized, we become electrified. We have to do this at this most basic level. It is our karma we must eliminate, but there's more than just the physical karma, which is what we're getting into, all right? And so that's what this little piece is, what healing is. And we're going to talk about is not just physical karma. There's other levels of karma. So let me carry on. Have you ever received any genuine teaching? How can you learn to treat illnesses in 3 or 5 days? How can you cure an illness with an ordinary person's hands? Nevertheless, such a phony Qigong master has taken advantage of your weaknesses and people's attachments. Don't you seek to cure illnesses? Well, this person will organize a treatment class that specifically teaches you some healing methods, such as the Qi needle, or the light illuminating method, or Qi discharging, Qi compensation, the so-called acupressure, and the so-called hand grabbing method. There are a variety of methods aiming at taking your money. Let us talk about the hand grabbing method. What we have seen is the following situation. Why do people get sick? The fundamental cause of one's being ill and all of one's misfortune is karma and the black substance karmic field. Okay, so I'll read this again. I'll highlight it. The fundamental cause of one's being ill and all of one's misfortune is karma, and the black substance is karmic field. It is something negative and bad. Those evil beings are also something negative, and they are all black. So it's like a black energy. Thus, they can come because this environment suits them. So what we see, just as an aside here, there is a culturing medium. There's something to attract. First, the dark field, the karmic field. This is the fundamental cause of one's being ill. It is the most principal source of illnesses. Of course, there are 2 other forms. One is very microscopic, being in high density, and that is like a cluster of karma. Another is as if delivered through a pipeline, but this is rarely seen. It is all accumulated from one's ancestors. There are also these cases. Let us talk about the most common illnesses. Somewhere in the body, one may have a tumor, an infection, osteophytosis, etc. It is because in another dimension, there lies a being in that place. That being is in a very deep dimension. An ordinary Qigong master or an ordinary supernatural capability is unable to detect it. They can only see the black qi in one's body. It is correct to say that wherever there is black qi, there is an illness. Yet, the black qi is not the fundamental cause of an illness. It is because there is a being in a deeper dimension who generates this field. So some people talk about discharging and removing the black qi, like a qi enema. Go ahead and discharge it as you wish. Shortly afterward, it will be generated again, as some beings are very powerful and can retrieve the qi as soon as it is removed. They can retrieve it on their own. Treatments just do not work no matter how they are applied. According to one who sees with supernatural capabilities, wherever there is black qi, that place is considered to have pathogenic qi. A doctor of Chinese medicine will find the energy channels blocked in that place, as the qi and blood are not circulating and the energy channels are congested. To a doctor of Western medicine, that place may present the symptom of an ulcer, a tumor, osteophytosis, or inflammation, etc. When it manifests in this dimension, it is in this form. After you remove that being, you will find that there is nothing wrong with the body in this dimension. Whether it is a protrusion of the lumbar intervertebral discs or osteophytosis, after you remove that thing and clear out that field, you will find it instantly heal. You can take another X-ray and find that osteophytosis has disappeared. The fundamental reason is that this being was producing an effect. Some people claim that by teaching you the hand-grabbing method, in 3 or 5 days, you can cure illnesses. Show me your hand-grabbing method. Human beings are the weakest, while the being is quite formidable. It can control your mind and easily manipulate you at will. It can even end your life easily. You claim that you can grab it. How do you grab it? You cannot reach it with your ordinary person's hand. You may grab aimlessly here, and it will ignore you and laugh at you behind your back. Grabbing aimlessly is so ridiculous. If you can really touch it, it will harm your hands at once. That will be a real wound. I saw some people before whose 2 hands looked normal by any examination, but their bodies and their 2 hands were not ill. But they could not raise their hands, which kept hanging like this. I have come across such a patient. His body in another dimension was injured. In that case, he was really paralyzed. If that body of yours is injured, aren't you paralyzed? Some people ask me, "Teacher, will I be able to practice Qigong? I had a sterilization operation," or "I've had something removed from my body." I said to them, it doesn't matter since your body is in another dimension, didn't have an operation. Did I read that right? It doesn't matter since your body in another dimension didn't have an operation. And in Qigong practice, it's that body which is acted upon. Therefore, I just said that when you try to grab it, it will ignore you if you cannot reach it. If you touch it, it might injure your hand. To support a major state-run Qigong event, I took some disciples to participate in the Oriental Health Expo in Beijing. At both of these two expos, we were the most outstanding practice. At the first expo, our Falun Dafa was honored as the Star Qigong School. At the second expo, our place was so crowded that we simply could not handle it. There were not many people at other exhibition booths, but our booth was crowded with people. There were 3 waiting lines. The first line was for those who registered early in the morning treatment. The second line was waiting to register for the afternoon treatment. And the third line waiting for my autograph. We do not treat illnesses. Why do we do it? Because this was to support a major state-run Qigong event, and to contribute to this cause, we participated in it. I distributed my gong to the disciples who were there with me. Each one got 1 share that was an energy cluster composed of over 100 supernormal abilities. I sealed their hand with gong, but even so, some people's hands were bitten to the point of blistering or bleeding. This even happened quite often. The beings were quite vicious. Do you think you dare to touch them with an ordinary person's hands? Besides, you cannot reach it. It will not work without that kind of supernormal ability. This is because in another dimension, it will know whatever you want to do as soon as you think about it. When you try to grab it, it will have already run away. Right when the patient goes to the door, it will go back there immediately, and the illness will recur. Dealing with it requires such a supernormal ability in which one extends one's hands and bam, nails it there. Upon nailing it there, we have another supernormal ability that was once called the Great Soul Catching Method. And that supernormal ability is even more powerful. It can take out one's primordial spirit, and instantly the person will be unable to move. This supernormal ability has its specific purpose, and we just target this thing to grab. Everyone knows that though you find Sun Wukong very big, the Tathagata can use the bowl in his hand to turn Sun Wukong into a very tiny thing by covering him up. This supernormal ability can have this effect. No matter how large or how tiny the being is, it will be grabbed in the hand instantly and become very tiny. Additionally, it is not permissible for one's hand to dig into the physical body of a patient and take something out. That would bring disorder to people's minds in ordinary human society, and that is absolutely prohibited. Even if it were possible, it could not be done this way. The hand one digs with is the hand in another dimension. Suppose that someone has heart disease. When this hand moves towards the heart to grab that being, the hand in another dimension moves inside the body, and it will be caught instantly. As your outside hand grabs it, both hands close in and will grab it. It is very vicious, sometimes moving in your hands and attempting to drill into them, and sometimes biting and screaming. Though it appears to be very small in your hand, it will become very large if you release it from your hands. This is not something that just anyone can touch. Without that supernormal ability, one cannot touch it at all. It is completely unlike how simple people would imagine it. Of course, this form of Qigong treatment might be allowed to exist in the future, as in the past it always existed. But there must be a condition. This person must be a practitioner. In the course of cultivation practice, out of compassion, this person is allowed to do this for a few good people, but he cannot completely eliminate their karma, since he does not have enough great virtue. Therefore, tribulations will still exist. But the specific diseases will be healed. They will be healed. An ordinary Qigong master is not a person who has attained the Tao in cultivation practice. He can only put off illness or perhaps transform them. He might transform them into other misfortune. Yet himself may not even know of this deferral process. If this practice cultivates the assistant consciousness, it is done by his assistant consciousness. Practitioners in some practices appear to be very famous. Many well-known Qigong masters do not have gong because their gong grows in the bodies of his assistant consciousness. That is, some people are permitted to do such things in the course of cultivation practice because they continue to stay at this level. They have been practicing over a decade, for several decades, and still cannot go beyond this level. So throughout their lives, they always see patients. Because they stay at this level, they are allowed to do that. Falun Dafa disciples are absolutely forbidden to treat patients. You can read this book to a patient. If the patient can accept it, it can heal their illness. But the results will differ according to each person's karma. All right, so I'm not going to read Hospital Treatment of Qigong. And, this is a fascinating book, and I only read this little section thus far. But let's talk a little bit about, as I share random pictures, let's talk a little bit about karma and its role in dis-ease. Karma, as we saw with that little description of whatever, I guess it was like a practice of philosophy or healing, seemed like a Far East practice. Dis-ease, as they was mentioned in that little work, is associated with energy in the form of dark energy that kind of creates that culturing medium to manifest dis-ease, manifest the energy to bring about disharmony in the human body. And so how does this relate really to those of us that might be beginning to feel this illness that is kind of permeating our entire society, right? Our entire society is kind of going through a little bit of what we can think of bad karma. Jesus, when Jesus incarnated on this planet 2,000 years ago, and I know there's a lot of people that don't necessarily believe that Jesus was real, and that's fine and dandy. Maybe he was just kind of an idea, an energy, if you will. But I do believe in the Christ impulse, and I do believe that Jesus was someone that fundamentally changed our planet and brought forth a new level for us to ascend to. You know, when we talk about evolution and the evolution of consciousness, you know, as our planet evolves, and I kind of talked a little bit about this last time, the evolution of our planet, and you know, it's splitting into a new form, a new earth, if you will. We do have to kind of get rid of some of the lower density, the lower vibration that could be part of that culturing medium, that dark energy that could be attracting the dis-ease that many of us are feeling. You know, and we could go through a lot of theories as to why is it that there is this disharmony created now. You know, I do believe that there is something going energetically through our planet, something permeating our planet. And I'm not quite sure if this is a man-made type of illness, but you have to remember that all illnesses, all dis-ease, all disharmony, it's really just energy. And it's energy that can be transmuted. It's energy that can be changed. And this kind of connects, you know, and I'm kind of in a long-winded way trying to get to this point. This all can get to a point where we can transmute it and elevate it and go beyond it and change it. I think humans are powerful enough to take the darkness, the energy, and transmute it into something else. I do believe that that is possible. You know, I'm working with a client and I'm trying to help them deal with whatever physical illness they might be struggling with. What can I do to help them get to the point where they can energetically transmute that into something else? And I think it comes down to some soul searching. We have to get to a place where we can touch upon what might be creating the environment that is forcing us to go through this. You know, it's really easy to say, well, this illness is forcing me to pause in my life and to reflect. Maybe you live a very stressful or busy life. You're not taking time to, you know, stop and smell the roses. What can we do to really bring forth an environment of healing, of higher consciousness? You know, a lot of times when I'm working with clients, I will tell them that, you know, when they detoxify, when they're releasing congestion from their body, that energy that, you know, as they mentioned in that written work, that kind of black chi, that dark karmic energy, it's holding not just physical, but also emotional and spiritual energy that will all be released when that congestion is broken, dispersed, and then we have to eliminate it. And with that release, all of the trapped emotions, they too will come back and you'll have to relive that all over again. So we don't ever escape our past. We cannot. You don't escape, you know, the the abuse. You know, if you had a night of just heavy drinking and you just kind of like didn't care and just thought I was going to party and blah, 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 you know, the next day you're going to have a hangover. You have to pay for your karma. There are consequences. All right. So that brings me to the second main topic of what I wanted to talk about today. And I think my camera is still going through old pictures. So I know it looks like, oh, my dog Lucky is on the screen. I love her so much. So I'm going to switch screens here. I wanted to read from this book today, The Kybalion. The Kybalion. And this does kind of connect with a lot of what we're getting into, because when it comes to healing disease, we have to evolve. I mean, we don't have to do anything, right? Humans are on their own when it comes to their own evolution. I just really think it's quite recommended to know who you are, to know thyself. The Oracle of Delphi, know thyself. And a part of knowing yourself is knowing kind of what it means to be human, you know, and to get to become more familiar with occulted knowledge, esoteric teachings. I think all of that will help in addressing how you can understand and dispel and break down that black chi, that black, dark, energetic, confusing entity that can attract poor decision making, and poor decision making can lead to the karmic consequences of ill health. So I'm going to read a little bit from the Kybalion with you all today. And, you know, I find sometimes just reading from these amazing books to be quite helpful in our understanding. You can look at one of my favorite bookmarks. I love wolves so much. I love them. Anyway, the Hermetic philosophy. We're going to read about the Hermetic philosophy. For those of you that are not familiar with the Kybalion, we'll get into it. The lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of understanding. The Kybalion. From an old Egypt have come the fundamental esoteric and occult teachings, which have so strongly influenced the philosophies of all races, nations, and peoples for several thousand years. Egypt, the home of the pyramids and the Sphinx, was the birthplace of the hidden wisdom and mystic teachings. From her secret doctrine, all nations have borrowed. India, Persia, Chaldea, Medea, China, Japan, Assyria, ancient Greece, and Rome. And other ancient countries partook liberally at the feast of knowledge which the hierophants and masters of the land of Isis so freely provided for those who came prepared to partake of the great store of mystic and occult lore, which the masterminds of that ancient land had gathered together. In ancient Egypt dwelt the great adepts and masters who have never been surpassed and who seldom have been equaled. During the centuries that have taken their processional flight since the days of great Hermes. In Egypt was located the great lodge of lodges and of the mystics, and the doors of her temples entered the neophytes who afterward, as hierophants, adepts, and masters, traveled to the four corners of the earth, carrying with them the precious knowledge which they were ready anxious and willing to pass on to those who were ready to receive the same. All students of the occult recognize the debt that they owe to these venerable masters of that ancient land. But among these great masters of ancient Egypt, there once dwelt one of whom masters hailed, the master of masters. This man, if man indeed he was, dwelt in Egypt in the earliest days. He was known as Hermes Trismegistus. He was the father of the occult wisdom, the father of astrology, the father of alchemy. The details of his life story are lost to history, owing to the lapse of the years, though several of the ancient countries disputed with each other in their claims to the honor of having furnished his birthplace. And this thousands of years ago. The date of his sojourn in Egypt, in that his last incarnation on this planet, is not now known. But it has been fixed at the early days of the oldest dynasties of Egypt, long before the days of Moses. The best authorities regarded him as a contemporary of Abraham. And some of the Jewish traditions go so far as to claim that Abraham acquired a portion of his mystic knowledge from Hermes himself. As the years rolled by after his passing from the plane of life, tradition recording that he lived 300 years in the flesh, the Egyptians deified Hermes and made him one of their gods under the name of Thoth. Years after, the people of ancient Greece also made him one of their many gods, calling him Hermes, the god of wisdom. The Egyptians revered his memory for many centuries, yes, tens of centuries, calling him the scribe of the gods and bestowing upon him distinctively his ancient title, Trismegistus, which means thrice great, or the great great, the greatest great, etc. In all the ancient lands, the name of Hermes Trismegistus was revered, and the name being synonymous with fount of wisdom. Even to this day, we use the term hermetic in the sense of secret, sealed so that nothing can escape. And this by reason of the fact that the followers of Hermes always observed that the principal secrecy of his teachings. They did not believe in casting pearls before swine, but rather held to teaching milk for babies, meat for strong men, both of which maxims are familiar to readers of Christian scriptures, but both of which had been used by the Egyptians for centuries before the Christian era. And this policy of careful dissemination of the truth has always characterized the Hermetics, even unto the present day. The Hermetic teachings are to be found in all lands, among all religions, but never identified with any particular country, nor with any particular religious sect. This because of the warning of the ancient teachers against the following secret doctrine to become crystallized into a creed. The wisdom of this caution is apparent to all students of history. The ancient occultism of India and Persia degenerated and was largely lost owing to the fact that the teachers became priests, and so mixed theology with the philosophy. Oh my goodness, I just realized like my screen is way below. Sorry about that, folks. I should look up and see where I am every now and then. The ancient occultism of India and Persia degenerated and was largely lost owing to the fact that the teachers became priests and so mixed theology with philosophy. The result being that the occultism of India and Persia had been gradually lost amidst the masks of religious superstition, cults, creeds, and gods. So it was with ancient Greece and Rome. So it was with the Hermetic teachings of the Gnostics and early Christians, which were lost at the time of Constantine, whose iron hand smothered philosophy with the blanket of theology, losing to the Christian church that which was its very essence and spirit, and causing it to grope throughout several centuries before it found its way back to its ancient faith. The indications apparent to all the followers, to all careful observers, in this 20th century being that the church is now struggling to get back to its ancient mystic teachings. But there were always a few faithful souls who kept alive the flame, tending it carefully and not allowing its light to become extinguished. And thanks to these staunch hearts and fearless minds, we have the truth still with us, but it is not found in books to any great extent. It has been passed along from master to student, from initiate to hierophant, from lip to ear. When it was written down at all, its meaning was veiled in terms of alchemy and astrology, so that only those possessing the key could read it aright. This was made necessary in order to avoid the persecutions of the theologians of the Middle Ages, who fought the secret doctrine with fire and sword, stake, gibbet, and cross. Even to this day, there will be found but few reliable books on Hermetic philosophy, although there are countless references to it. Many books written on various phases of occultism. And yet the Hermetic philosophy is the only master key which will open the doors of the occult teachings. In these early days, there were a compilation of certain basic Hermetic doctrines passed on from teacher to student, which are known as the Kybalion. The exact significance and meaning of these terms having been lost for several centuries. This teaching, however, is known to many to whom it has descended from mouth to ear, on and on throughout the centuries. Its precepts have never been written down or printed, so far as we know. It was merely a collection of maxims, axioms, and precepts, which were non-understandable to outsiders, but which were readily understood by students after the axioms, maxims, and precepts had been explained and exemplified by the Hermetic initiates and their neophytes. These teachings really constituted the basic principles of the art of Hermetic alchemy, which, contrary to general belief, dealt in the mastery of mental forces rather than material elements. The transmutation of one kind of mental vibration into others, instead of changing of one kind of metal into another. The legends of the Philosopher's Stone, which would turn base metal into gold, was an allegory relating to Hermetic philosophy, readily understood by all students of Hermeticism. In this little book, of which this is the first lesson, we invite our students to examine into the Hermetic teachings as set forth in the Kybalion, and as explained by ourselves, humble students of the teachings, who, while bearing the title of initiates, are still students at the feet of Hermes, the master. We herein give you the many of the maxims, axioms, and precepts of the Kybalion, accompanied by explanations and illustrations, which we deem likely to render the teachings more easily comprehended by the modern student, particularly as the original text is purposefully veiled in obscure terms. The original maxims, axioms, and precepts of the Kybalion are printed herein, in quotation marks, the proper credit being given. Our own work is printed in the regular way, in the body of the work. We trust that many students to whom we now offer this little work will derive as much benefit from the study of its pages as have the many who have gone before, treading the same path to mastery throughout the centuries that have passed since the time of Hermes Trismegistus, the master of masters, the great. In the words of the Kybalion, where fall the footsteps of the master, the ears of those ready for his teachings open wide. When the ears of the student are ready to hear, then cometh the lips to fill them with wisdom. So that according to the teachings, the passage of this book to those ready for the instruction will attract the attention of such as are prepared to receive the teaching. And likewise, when the pupil is ready to receive the truth, then will this little book come to him or her. Such is the law, the Hermetic principle of cause and effect. In its aspect of the law of attraction, will bring lips and ear together, the pupil and book in company. So mote it be. So mote it be. All right, folks. So let's look at these 7 Hermetic principles. So the 7 Hermetic principles. Let's read this little quote from the Kybalion first. The principles of truth are 7. He who knows these understandingly possesses the magic key before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. The 7 Hermetic principles upon the entire Hermetic philosophy is based are as follows. 1, the principle of mentalism. All is mental. 2, the principle of correspondence. 3, the principle of vibration. 4, the principle of polarity. 5, the principle of rhythm. 6, the principle of cause and effect. And 7, the principle of gender. And just a couple of things before I carry on. Mark Passio did a great in-depth review of these 7 principles. I remember years ago when I first came across Mark Passio and his work, really getting into his podcast where he breaks it down, explains it. He did a wonderful job. What I find fascinating is the number of 7 and how often it's used in esoteric teachings. I'm currently reading The Secret Doctrine, and Madame Blavatsky talks about these 7 cycles, and we have 7 chakras. Anyway, if you want to go into this and have someone annotate, kind of explain it as they go along, check out What on Earth is Happening and check out Mark Passio's podcast. So These 7 principles will be discussed and explained as we proceed with these lessons. A short explanation of each, however, may as well be given at this point. First, let's look at the principle of mentalism. The all is mind. The universe is mental. This principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances, which we know under the terms of material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, all that is apparent to our material senses is spirit. Okay, so the all is spirit. That's what this principle embodies. All is mind, all is spirit, which in itself is unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as an universal, infinite living mind. It also explains that all the phenomenal world is universe is simply a mental creation of the all, subject to the laws of created things, and that the universe as a whole, and in turn its parts or units, has an existence in the mind of the all, in which the mind we live and move and have our being. This principle, by establishing mental nature of the universe, easily explains all of the varied mental and psychic phenomena that occupy such a large portion of public attention, and which, without such explanation, non-understandable and defy scientific treatment. An understanding of this great hermetic principle of mentalism enables the individual to readily grasp the laws of the mental universe and to apply the same to his well-being and advancement. You know, I need to reread that. I'm just, sometimes I read a paragraph and I feel uneasy, meaning that I need to go back and revisit those words. So coming back down here, this principle, by establishing the mental nature of the universe, easily explains all of the varied mental and psychic phenomena that occupy such a large portion of public attention. So this principle, by establishing the mental nature of the universe, easily explains all of the varied mental and psychic phenomena that occupy such a large portion of the public attention, and which, without such explanation, non-understandable and defy scientific treatment. An understanding of this great hermetic principle of mentalism enables the individual to easily grasp the laws of the mental universe and to apply the same to his well-being and advancement. The hermetic student is enabled to apply intelligently the great mental laws instead of using them in a haphazard manner. With the master key in his possession, the student may unlock many doors of the mental and psychic temple of knowledge and enter the same freely and intelligently. This principle explains the true nature of energy, power, and matter, and why and how all these subordinate to the mastery of mind. One of the old Hermetic masters wrote long ages ago, He who grasps the truth of the mental nature of the universe is well advanced on the path to mastery. And these words are so true today as at that time they were first written. Without this master key, mastery is impossible. And the student knocks in vain at the doors of many temples, at the doors of the temple. You know, folks, I feel like I want to go into this principle of mentalism a little bit more. And I know this entire book is going through all of these 7 major principles. You know, they're just introducing it at the beginning, right? Sometimes I get a little frustrated and I just want to know it right off the bat. You know, it's been a while since I've looked at the Kabbalion. And I know when I first was studying it, when I was going along with the teachings of Mark Passio, I understood probably just a small, minuscule amount of what these teachings really hold. And this is why I want to read this with you, because I think this is at the core of healing, understanding these principles, understanding our spiritual evolution, and understanding why we're here. So maybe I'll just comment on this a little bit before I go on to just introducing the remaining principles. But I get caught up in trying to understand what's going on in the world. You know, that's Mark Passio's website, What on Earth is Happening? And it's really, I mean, you can describe things, but can you really know? I mean, I can describe what I see. I can describe that, you know, I was at a faculty meeting yesterday and they were talking about contact tracers and how, you know, if we're teaching on campus and a student is ill, how we have to, you know, make notes of things, and the contact tracer needs to know where the student was sitting. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what has happened? What has happened to our world? These energies, even if it's black chi, this energy that creates the precursor of attracting illness, it is karma. Every one of us is taking on from something we each individually have to permeate, understand, transmute, and dispel in order to spiritually evolve, in order for us to release that attachment. Why are we talking about contact tracing? You know, the control system definitely doesn't want us to know these powerful principles. This is what we have to know, though. It really comes down to knowing this, knowing why we're here. Okay, so all this mental. Now let's move on to the second principle. The second principle, the principle of correspondence. As above, so below, as below, so above. This principle embodies the truth that there is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of being and life. The old Hermetic axiom in these words, as above, so below, as below, so above, and the grasping of this principle gives one the means of solving many dark paradox, the hidden secret of nature. There are planes beyond our knowing. But when we apply the principle of correspondence to them, we are able to understand much that which otherwise be unknowable to us. This principle is of universal application and manifestation on the various planes of the material, mental, and spiritual universe. It is an universal law. The ancient Hermeticists considered this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which man was able to pry aside the obstacles which hid from view the unknown. Its use even tore aside the veil of Isis, to the extent that a glimpse of the face of the goddess might be caught. Just as a knowledge of the principles of geometry enables man to measure distant suns and their movements while seated in his observatory, so the knowledge of the principle of correspondence enables man to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown. Studying the monad, he understands the archangel. I'm sure there's much we could discuss on this, but let's move on to the principle number 3, the third principle, the principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. This principle embodies the truth that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, nothing is at rest. Facts, which modern science endorses, and which each new scientific discovery tends to verify. And yet this Hermetic principle was enunciated thousands of years ago by the masters of ancient Egypt. This principle explains that the differences between different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely from varying rates of vibration. From the all, which is pure spirit, down to the grossest form of matter, all is in vibration. The higher the vibration, the higher the position in the scale. The vibration of spirit is at such an infinite rate of intensity and rapidity that it is practically at rest, just as a rapidly moving wheel seems to be motionless. And at the other end of the scale, there are gross forms of matter whose vibrations are so low as to also seem at rest. Between these poles, there are millions upon millions of varying degrees of vibration, from corpuscle to electron, atom and molecule to worlds and universes. Everything is in vibratory motion. This is also true on the planes of energy and force, which are but varying degrees of vibration, and also on the mental planes, whose states depend upon vibrations, and even on the spiritual planes. An understanding of this principle with the appropriate formulas enables Hermetic students to control their own mental vibrations as well as those of others. That's kind of an interesting sentence. An understanding of this principle with the appropriate formulas enables Hermetic students to control their own mental vibrations as well as those of others. That bothers me a bit. Anyway, the masters also apply this principle to the conquering of natural phenomena. In various ways, he who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power, says one of the old writers. Sorry, I didn't have this up as high as it should have been. Reading this brings back to mind kind of where I was mentally when I first was studying the 7 Hermetic principles. And a thought came to mind, something that I was experiencing in my life when I was learning about these principles. And I don't think I feel comfortable sharing this right now, but it's kind of disturbing. Interesting how certain feelings and certain knowings come to you when you may least expect it. Let's move on to principle number 4, the principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. This principle embodies the truth that everything is dual. Everything has two poles. Everything has its pair of opposites, all of which were old Hermetic axioms. It explains the old paradoxes that have perplexed so many, which have been stated as follows. Thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree. Opposites are the same, differing only in degree. The pairs of opposites may be reconciled. Extremes meet. Everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half false. There are two sides to everything, etc., etc., etc. It explains that in everything there are two poles or opposite aspects, and that opposites are really only the two extremes of the same thing, with many varying degrees between them. So, like, for example, there is something that makes you feel a temperature, right? A temperature could be -20, it could be +50. They're both what you feel as varying degrees of energy, but vary in terms of opposite experiences, cold or hot, right? Look at your thermometer. To illustrate, heat and cold, although opposites, are really the same thing. The differences consisting merely of degrees of the same thing. Look at your thermometer and see if you can discover where heat terminates and cold begins. There is no such thing as absolute heat or absolute cold. The terms heat and cold simply indicate varying degrees of the same thing. And that same thing which manifests as heat and cold is merely a form, variety, and rate of vibration. So heat and cold are simply the two poles of that which we call heat. And the phenomena attendant thereupon are manifestations of the principle of polarity. The same principle manifests in the case of light and darkness, which are the same thing, the difference consisting of varying degrees between the two poles of the phenomena. Where does the darkness leave off and the light begin? What is the difference between large and small, between hard and soft, between black and white, between sharp and dull, between noise and quiet, between high and low, between positive and negative? The principle of polarity explains these paradoxes, and no other principle can supersede it. The same principle operates on the mental plane. Let us take a radical and extreme example, that of love and hate. Two mental states apparently totally different, and yet there are degrees of hate and degrees of love. And a middle point in which we use terms like or dislike, which shade into each other so gradually that sometimes we are at a loss to know whether we like or dislike or neither. And all are simply degrees of the same thing. As you will see, if you will, but think a moment. And more than this, and considered of more importance by Hermeticists, it is possible to change the vibrations of hate into the vibrations of love in one's own mind and in the minds of others. Many of you who read these lines have had personal experiences of the involuntary rapid transition from love to hate, and the reverse in your own case and that of others. And you will therefore realize possibly of this being accomplished by the use of will, by means of the Hermetic formulas,
Good and evil are but the poles of the same things, and the Hermeticist understands the art of transmuting evil into good by means of the application of the principle of polarity. Hermeticists understand the art of transmuting evil into good by means of the application of the principle of polarity. In short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy, known and practiced by the ancient and modern Hermetic masters. An understanding of the principle will enable one to change his own polarity, as well as that of others, if he will devote the time and study necessary to master this art. Interesting, folks. Interesting. You know, there's so much to these principles that coming back to them years later, I appreciate how little I understood them. And I don't know, it's kind of like they say, the more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know and what there is left to know. And more importantly, what there is left to understand. I am drinking this. This is really good. It's a sparkling herbal tonic, lemon rose uplift. I got this in my little food delivery today. All right, the principle of rhythm, number 5, the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. A pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. This principle embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion to and fro, a flow, and in flow a swing backward and forward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, high tide, low tide. Between the two poles, which exist in accordance with the principle of polarity described a moment ago, there is always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking. This is the affairs of the universe, suns, worlds, men, animals, mind, energy, and matter. This law is manifest in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life of all things, and finally in the mental state of man. And it is with this latter that the Hermeticists find the understanding of the principle most important. That is in the mental state of man. Sorry. I sometimes, just become enthralled with the sentence that I just read, and I have to let it percolate in my mind for a moment before I can move on. The Hermeticists have grasped this principle, finding its universal application, and have also discovered certain means to overcome its effects in themselves by the use of the appropriate formulas and methods. They apply the mental law of neutralization. They cannot annul the principle or cause it to cease its operation, but they have learned how to escape its effects upon themselves to a certain degree, depending upon the mastery of this principle. They have learned how to use it instead of being used by it. In this and similar methods consists the art of the Hermeticists. The master of Hermetics polarizes himself at the point at which he desires to rest, and then neutralizes the rhythmic swing of the pendulum, which would tend to carry him to the opposite pole. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery do this to a certain degree, more or less unconsciously, but the master does this consciously. and by the use of his will, and attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of the masses who were swung backward and forward like a pendulum. This principle, of polarity and that of polarity have been closely studied by Hermeticists, and the methods of counteracting, neutralizing, and using them form an important part of the Hermetic mental alchemy. You know, as I was reading that, I got a mental image of just how easily this image of the pendulum describes, what we might call the sheeple, the people that are so easily swayed, and how their emotional expression is controlled by the media and controlled by the powers that should not be. Those on the news, just like a puppet, controlling their arms, their legs, putting on the mask, taking off the mask, getting the injection. I mean, oh my goodness. See how much we need to understand these principles? I mean, if society, if humanity, if life were based on what was most important for our spiritual, emotional, physical, mental existence, we would be in discussion of these principles at all times. All right, principle number 6. Principle number 6, the principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law, not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. The law. This must be natural law. It must be. This principle embodies the fact that there is a cause for every effect and an effect from every cause. It explains that everything happens according to the law, that nothing ever merely happens, that there is no such thing as chance, that while there are various planes of cause and effect, the higher dominating the lower planes, still nothing ever entirely escapes the law. Hermeticists understand the art and methods of rising above the ordinary plane of cause and effect. To a certain degree, and by mentally rising to a higher plane, they become causers instead of effects. The masses of people are carried along, obedient to environment, the wills and desires of others, stronger than themselves, heredity, suggestion, and other outward causes moving them about like pawns on the chessboard of life. But the masters rising to the plane above dominate their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as the environment surrounding them, and become movers instead of pawns. They help to play the game of life instead of being played and moved about by other wills and environment. They use this principle instead of being its tools. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but they help to rule on their own plane. In this statement, there is condensed a wealth of Hermetic knowledge. Let him read who can. Damn. All right. That was powerful, folks. That one was a big one. One more principle, because my live stream is coming to a close here. The 7th principle is the principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. This principle embodies the truth that there is gender manifested in everything, the masculine and the feminine principles ever at work. This is true not only of the physical plane, but of the mental and even the spiritual planes. On the physical plane, the principle manifests as sex. On the higher planes, it takes higher forms, but the principle is ever the same. No creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. No creation is possible without this principle. An understanding of its laws will throw light on many a subject that has perplexed the minds of men. The principle of gender works ever in the direction of generation, regeneration, and creation. Everything and every person contains two elements or principles, or this great principle within it, him or her. Every male thing has the female element also. Every female contains the male principle. If you would understand the philosophy of mental, spiritual creation, generation, and regeneration, you must understand and study the Hermetic principle. It contains the solution of many mysteries of life. We caution you that this principle has no reference to the many base, pernicious, and degrading lustful theories, teachings, and practices that are taught under fanciful titles, and which are prostitution of the great principle, of the great natural principle of gender. Such base revivals of the ancient infamous forms of phallicism tend to ruin mind, body, and soul. And the Hermetic philosophy has ever sounded the warning note against these degraded teachings, which tends toward lust, licentiousness, I don't know if I said that word correctly, and perversion of nature's principles. If you seek such teachings, you must go elsewhere for them. Hermeticism contains nothing for you along these lines. To the pure, all things are pure. To the base, all things are base. All right, folks, I'm not going to begin the in-depth discussion of that first principle, mental transmutation. Maybe we'll read this little. Mind, as well as all metals and elements, may be transmuted from state to state, degree to degree, condition to condition, pole to pole, vibration to vibration. True Hermetic transmutation is a mental art. As we've stated, the Hermeticists were the original alchemists, astrologers, and psychologists. Hermes having been the founder of these schools of thought. Hermes Trismegistus. Well, with my last 10 minutes, I'll come back to YouTube to see, oh, Natural Freedom League was here saying hello to me. And then Emoji King. Well, thank you both. I'm just now seeing your comments. I am going to come back and remind us all what we are here to do today, and that is heal ourselves. That's really what I began this live stream with, a focus on healing ourselves. And, the teachings of Jesus, he again came to our knowing as a Christ at the mystery of Golgotha. When Jesus became the Christ, he knew he had to teach the masses to go through what he himself had to go through. So let's just go ahead and revisit this video again. I just like this song, to be honest with you. This is one of my favorite. I don't know if it's my favorite song from Jesus Christ Superstar, but I kind of like it. So let's watch it as we finish up this live stream.
See my eyes, I can hardly see.
See me stand, I can hardly walk.
I believe you can make me whole.
See my tongue, I can hardly talk.
See my skin, I'm a mass of blood.
Change my life, oh, I know you can.
I believe you can make me well.
See my path. you kiss? You can cure me right. Won't you kiss? Won't you pay me right?
See our eyes, we can hardly see. See us stand, we can hardly walk. We believe you can make us whole. See the tongues that can hardly talk.
See us give, we're a mass of blood. Change our lives, oh we know you can. We believe you can make us proud. You're the hope of a poor, poor man.
Will you touch, will you make me Christ? Won't you touch, will you heal me Christ? Will you kiss, you can cure me Christ? Won't you kiss, won't you make me Christ?
See our eyes, we can hardly see. See us stand, we can hardly walk. We believe you can make us whole. See the tongues that can hardly talk. See us give, we're a mass of blood. Change our lives, oh we know you can. We believe you can make us well. You're the hope of a poor, poor man. Will you touch, will you make me Christ? Won't you touch, will you heal me Christ? Will you kiss, will you cure me Christ? Won't you kiss, won't you pay me Christ? See our eyes, we can hardly see.
Too many of you.
That can hardly walk. I believe you can make me whole. See
Push
my
me.
love, I can hardly talk. See
Too
my skin, I'm a
little
mass
of
of blood.
me.
See my legs, I can hardly
Don't
stand.
crowd
We
me.
believe you can make us
Don't
well. See
crowd
my
me.
love, I'm a poor, poor man. Will you touch, will you make me Christ? Won't you touch, will you heal me Christ? Will you kiss, will you cure me Christ? Won't you kiss, will you make me Christ?
Yourselves.
So, as we finish up, I want to end with this discussion of health and this virus of the mind that is percolating within our society right now. Please have compassion on those that are, treating this illness as if it were real. And remember that everything is energy, everything is mental, spiritual. Visit the Hermetic principles, read them, study the Kabbalion, heal yourselves. I will heal me, you heal you. Resolve the karma that is creating the dense medium that attracts this dark energy, creating ill health. This is how Jesus can help us all evolve and truly save us. Jesus isn't the one doing the work. He is the one that is the messenger, sharing with us the work that must be done. Each one of us, we each need to know thyself. Understand the karma that has brought you to where you are today. It's a journey and it's work, but this is the most important work I think each one of us can do. Try not to get caught up in the propaganda, the minutia, the distractions. We don't need to know all of the details behind the latest gossip or, I know some distractions can be funny. Some comedy every now and then never hurts. Or maybe it does, I don't know. Who am I to judge whether or not something is truly hurting us? I don't know all of the answers. But really, when it does come down to healing and what we each can do to resolve this, yes, there are the basic suggestions I can share. Water fasting, focusing on water-rich fruits, high nutrient, phytonutrient types of foods that are so cleansing and astringent and helping to break down the congestion. And as much as exercise is beautiful, rest is also quite important, because with rest, we allow the body time to repair and to regenerate. We allow our energy to be more focused in the healing processes. That's just the simple stuff, though. This is a spiritual journey, and we can't really stop with just the physical answers. I wish you all a beautiful week. And you are in control. You're powerful. Bye.